Good morning, everybody. Adrian Joyce here, Secretary General of EuroACE. I'm delighted to welcome you to our third webinar in our second series on the Renovation Wave in Action. And this morning we're going to be sharing experiences from three of our member companies on being engaged, innovative and smart, getting prepared for the renovation wave. My role is just to give you guidance on etiquette during the webinar and to moderate the Q&A session, introducing the speakers as we go along. So for best performance, we're asking you to please remain muted throughout the entire webinar. We're asking you to keep your cameras off for the entire duration of the webinar. Evidently, speakers will unmute during their presentations and the Q&A session, which will last about 20 to 25 minutes towards the end. Now, ahead of the Q&A session and during all the presentations, please feel free to send a message in the chat box to everyone with your questions, which I will then gather together into themes to ask back to the speakers during the Q&A session. If time doesn't allow us to cover all of those questions, then we will forward them to the speakers afterwards for a later response. Two other things, we will share the PowerPoint presentation and the webinar is being recorded so that you will be able to view it through our website in a couple of days' time. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce the Vice President of EuroACE, Céline Carré, who is going to give us some introductory words. Céline, over to you.
Yes, can you hear me, Adrian?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, so very briefly, an introduction to today's webinar, and you can go to the next slide. So this is a quick reminder about EuroACE. Most of you around this call will know us, but so we are 13 member companies representing over 200,000 employees in Europe, 900 production facilities. Our purpose is to be the voice of energy efficiency in buildings, and we like to say that we are unique in developing a comprehensive message that accounts for the synergies and between all of our technologies and the solutions of our member. We are obviously very present today on Green Deal debates and recovery package, as you can imagine. The next slide. We do this because we are convinced that energy efficiency in buildings is the most cost-effective method, not only to reach our climate goals, but also to create jobs in a sector that is populated by a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. But it's also very important to meet people's expectations in terms of health and comfort aspirations from when they are in their buildings. You can go to the next slide. This is a quick word. You will know that EuroACE has launched nearly a decade ago the Renovate Europe campaign that aims to broaden the understanding of what is at stake for building and encourage a stronger alignment of policies and financing around the deep renovation of the building stock in order to motivate national actors to take action. We currently have 38 partners. You can go to the next slide that actually shows one of the examples of our activities. This was the latest Renovate Europe Day in the European Parliament, where we had an exhibition showcasing what's happening on renovation in a number of member states. And for today, you can go to the next slide. Yes, we want to discover how business gets ready for the renovation wave, on which we have talked along a series of webinars already. So we're going to focus on three aspects. One is about how to engage the consumer in the energy renovation journey. It's going to be presented by our member Velux. The second one is about prototyping the changing customer behavior by our member Rockwell. And the last and third presentation will be about how to embrace smartness in the building and in the renovation wave by our member Signify. Over to you. Yes, we can move to our speaker, Rainer from Velux.
So thank you very much, Celine, for that introduction. And indeed, Tille Rainer is our first speaker. Welcome, Tille, from Velux in Germany. Tille, just say next slide when you need to move forward, and my colleague Eva will oblige. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. Does the microphone work? Okay.
Yes, it does.
Okay, good morning to everyone from Hamburg. I would like to introduce you to some thoughts and more important activities and instruments to see and to plan energy renovation integrated with other benefits and qualities. Next slide. Our all issue is to support climate objectives. Therefore, we focus mainly on energy effects when we discuss renovation. But as we want to win the support by people owning houses and living in houses, we should always consider that houses are mainly homes for people that have a broader range of qualities. We should have an integrated view to push renovation in Europe. In this slide, Velux decided to focus on health and well-being and started to launch the Healthy Homes Barometers from 2015. Next slide. We have done a yearly Healthy Homes Barometer since 2015 to raise awareness of the problem and potential with healthy buildings. We wish to engage in dialogue with the industry and practitioners, but also with lawmakers. Who makes the rules and that defines the boundaries of buildings design? In the 2015 and 16 editions, we took an approach based on qualitative research, asking 14,000 Europeans in 14 different European countries how they perceive their homes and the health impacts. With the 2017 and 18 barometers, we took a quantitative approach basing our research on the EU's Eurostat data. In 2019, we continued down this road and have used Eurostat data from more than 100,000 individual households and more than 250,000 adults across all EU member states. It was carried out by the research institute Brand Europe, a non-profit research institute. Let me now switch to a more practical level, as that is also the focus of the webinar here today. We know exactly what we have to do to make our buildings healthier. We need buildings which have adequate daylight, good planned daylight, comfortable indoor temperature and humidity levels. Oh, sorry, next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So our factors which we have to focus is adequate daylight and comfortable indoor temperature and humidity levels, and also a good planned and I think a dynamic artificial lighting to enhance daylight, proper ventilation, and also good acoustics. These are the parameters which we see are important to see in an integrated way. Next slide. On the way to find good solutions, Velux is active member of Active House Alliance, an alliance of science, researcher, industry, and associations. We are discussing and sharing insights on the way how to get a good planning of climate-friendly houses. And we share one position that health, environment, and energies should be planned in an integrated way. It's nothing which should be against each other. Next slide. As part of the Model Home 2020 experiment, Velux developed new ways for living and working, including comfortable indoor climate, a lot of daylight, and optimal energy efficiency. The humans are in the center. The project takes up the different climatic, cultural, and architectural conditions in each case and develop specific solutions for maximum residential value and the best possible energy efficiency. Already in 2010, the project included 6 experiments, different model homes in 5 different countries. The German Lichtaktivhaus was the highest, had the highest energy efficiency without compromising regarding living quality. The light active house adapts the needs of its occupants from food self-sufficiency to energy self-sufficiency. The Lichtaktivhaus is the first modernized settlers house which is completely CO2 neutral in Germany. The Renovative concept offers, which we realized later in Brussels, offers a simple, innovative and affordable solution to the renovation challenge. I think that's so important not to have high-end pilots, but also to develop good lighthouses which are in a social manner affordable and more realistic for a broader perspective. It is an example of how to transform European housing into a healthy and sustainable living space. Affordable, easy to reproduce, and scalable. That's important. These were the main criteria to set up for the Renovative projects in Anderlecht in Belgium. The Bon Air district is located in an old garden city and contains public housing as well as a large number of private properties. The foyer Anderlechtoise has 225 houses and the same building type in that area. The aim of the renovation project was to test the active house principles in social housing and single-family houses, where cost, comfort, and energy efficiency have to go hand in hand. The main goal of Renovative is to prove the financial viability of active house renovation and social housing schemes across Europe. The estimated renovation cost associated with Renovative met the tight budget framework of social housing in Brussels and the requirements set up in the Energy Performance of Buildings Standard, EBP. Please, next. The Renovative concept bases on active house principles. The 7 most applicable and cost-effective solutions for renovation. Each part consists of a building element that is created to give existing buildings the ability to perform on the same level as newly built houses. Depending on the existing building's design and renovation budget, the different elements can be implemented to increase the level of daylight, improve ventilation, strengthen the climate envelope, and expand the living space through this densification or extension. The concept's modularity adapts to each house typology. Please, next. Following the inauguration of the first house in May 2016, the authorities gave permission to implement the renovation concepts in 86 similar homes owned by the Le Foyer Anderlechtoise. The majority of these homes will experience exactly the same transformation, including the construction of a central staircase with automated roof windows on the top, better inclusion of daylight, improved insulation, and intelligent hybrid ventilation system, combining natural and mechanical ventilation. Status of replication. 6 houses out of 86 have already been renovated by the Foyer Anderlechtoise and are inhabited. For administrative reasons, the works were delayed and are still going on in the 80s others. The concept has also been reproduced in Flanders. Velux has also reproduced it in Slovakia, here outside of the social housing sector. Please, next. Now it's changed to how to realize it. It is not only important to discuss more qualities, energy and health and comfort. In the energy range, we already have a lot of good instruments for the planning process. In other areas, we miss a lot. And here we developed as Velux the daylight visualizer. The Velux Daylight Visualizer is a professional lighting simulation tool for the analysis of daylight conditions in buildings. It is intended to promote the use of daylight to aid professionals by predicting and documenting daylight levels and appearance of a space prior to realization of the building design. The difference between Daylight Visualizer and commonly used 3D visualization programs is that it permits you to accurately simulate and quantify daylight levels in interiors, whereas 3D visualization programs only generate images without information about the quantity and quality of daylight in given space. With Daylight Visualizer, you can take more informed decisions about daylight performance in architectural design. Next slide. And that tool was developed by Velux. The Velux Daylight Visualizer is a professional lighting simulation tool for the analysis of daylight conditions in buildings. It's intended to promote the use of daylight. And, sorry, there was a mistake in the order. Please, next slide. Yeah. Here is an example of the output of the Daylight Visualizer for the architect. You get a very exact overview of where you get in what time, season, and time of the day, which amount of daylight. And also, as I discussed, talked before, it is important to have a good combination of daylight planning and also artificial planning. That is also a good base to see where artificial lighting is needed and in which. That factor is the most commonly used performance indicator for the evaluation and specification of daylight conditions in buildings. It evaluates the amount and distribution of diffuse light in the building and in relation to the amount of diffuse light available outside under cloudy sky conditions, and is expressed as a percentage. Daylight factor levels are usually determined on a plan view at work plane height. And now we should see some 1, 2, 3 examples. So I think on the next slide, please. Next. Yeah. Okay. Here you can see what the planner can see when he's using the Daylight Visualizer. It's a really good simulation of rooms in different conditions, seasons, times during the day, and he's also able to show these pictures and also videos as simulations to his customer. I think that is highly important, and that supports the planner to get in dialogue with customer and talk about qualities and make the right decisions together. And yeah, so you see here residential homes, but also public homes. You can see that it's possible to plan. And as a last conclusion, it is important to plan how this is integrated to get the support and the acceptance by customers and from a political point of view from voters. And that is only possible if houses are renovated in a very good manner for energy efficiency, but also for health and comfort. And but for that, we need also integrated planning tools or a broader range of planning tools supporting the planners on the way of good renovation planning. Thank you.
Tille, thank you so much for that comprehensive presentation showing how integrating strategies and integrating technologies brings a much more healthy and comfortable environment for us to live in, a matter that's of such great importance today. So moving on, it's now my pleasure to introduce Dorte Gram from our member company Rockwool. Dorte is going to speak to us about the importance of prototyping and addressing or changing consumer behavior. Dorte, over to you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I guess you hear me loud and clear?
Perfectly well, thank you.
Super, thank you. Then bring me on to the next slide. Please. And I'd like to have the next one as well. Just a brief introduction. I know there has been biographies sent out, but just to let you know that most of my work life I've been in research and development. I have a background as a chemical engineer, so I'm much into the technique. That's not what I'm going to talk about today. It's much more about the people and the processes, and it's something I've taken with me from my many years in R&D. In Rockwool, I am part of the research and development department management team, so setting the strategic direction for where to go. And hence this topic of today of energy renovation is highly important for my work. Next slide, please. We work with a lot of challenges similar to all the other people listening in and all the other companies. And just like Velux, it's about health and well-being on many planes. We also work with acoustics and sound and making sure that there's a good atmosphere around schools, for example. Similar, we have projects around securing food and enough supplies for the growing population of the world. And of course, we look into the carbon emissions from the built environment that's out there. So this is just a few of our challenges that we're looking into. And if you bring me on to the next slide, please. I now change to the barriers to change and to new innovation. And in many technical areas, and especially in the building environment or in the build industry, it's the legislation that drives the change. What we see is coming out is that there's a lot of energy codes coming out from different countries, but especially also in Europe. There's a huge work going into securing all of this. And when there's a new code coming up, we all know we have to change, and that will apply to the new builds and the things that we are building out there. If there's no legislation coming, and we all live in our house where we thrive and live, and it's our homes, there's much less motivation for insulating more than what is required by the building codes, and certainly to extra renovate. I think the only cost driver there is to save money, and of course to support the whole well-being of the earth, but it's a little bit slow, the change there. And if you put on the next slide, I'd like to bring you into the different phases that everybody has to go through when they meet new things. This comes whether it's a new product or it's a new situation, or it's the same 5 phases that you have to go through. And that also applies to our customers when we present them with new products or even new legislation. So if you click twice now, I'd be happy. Yes, please. And that's what happens, is that we bring out a new product, then nobody really wants to see about it until there's an energy code coming in telling us that we need to adapt and we need to do new stuff. And you can say, if the customer only gets aware that there's a new product coming out when the codes are there, it's too late for us because we are behind then in the development team. So we'd like to move the processes of being aware of new products and the acceptance of them, and also the experimentation with them, a little bit earlier on in the development phase. And if you click once more, please, you'll see that this is what we're doing. We are trying to do prototypes, then we bring the customers in simply to take them faster through this process of change, because that would help us. And now, if you click on the next slide, please, I'll show you a little bit more about what we do. Okay, so this is just the words of what I just said. If you have a prototype, a real take it into your hand demonstration of what you want, the new product, what it is, you have a product, you can show it, and it's more like evidence. So you show what is possible. This is really important for us, as in the Rockwool Group. We sell things that are often more hidden than clearly seen. We keep talking about the secrets that we hide inside your walls. So we need to show what it is that we're doing. So that's very important for us. We bring the customers in to try and test the new products, and then they get involved in development. They give us feedback, and by this they create trust to us and to our new products, and that's part of making them go faster through the barriers of change. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. And of course, as being a big company, we have many projects, and we need to focus on how to get things through the big machine. So all the projects we run in the R&D department are run through a stage gate process with the standard governance and focus on delivering. Many things we divide into, everything is run in projects, and we have must-win projects, which is where we have a deadline. For example, a new legislation coming out, and we need to have a product out by then. That's typically what goes into the must-win things, where we prioritize the resources and make sure that we deliver on time. We have other projects where we don't have so hard deadlines, where we know that something is coming and we're working towards a goal. It's a little bit more flexible, but that's just how we divide our projects internally. Then below the red bar, we have something we call under the radar. It's actually a program that we're running, where we have a very, very sharp focus on defining the business challenges. So what is coming our way? It could be a legislation being flagged from the EU, knowing that it would arrive in our area in about 10 years. We would start then focusing on what does it bring to us? What challenges are we seeing towards our business? And if you click on the next slide, I'll explain more about the under the radar. Thank you. And if you focus on the left-hand side, on the white part of the slide, it's back to how you get ideas. And to get ideas, I guess you have all tried to be in that situation. You have to come up with a solution to something. You need to know what the challenge is. So that's one thing. We need to unfold the challenges. that we see in our business. We need to have a lot of skilled people around. That's the knowledge part. We have that, of course, in our R&D department. So the trick is to get the skills and the knowledge that they have up and playing together with the challenges that we know. And then, of course, they need to be motivated. They need to be told that it's fine and it's work, it's good, and we want them to work with the challenges that we present. So that's when you move to the other side of the slide, is how we work with all these ideation, is that we allow everybody to spend 10% of their work time on doing their own ideas, their own solutions to whatever challenge we present. It has to include Stonewool, of course, and our products, and it has to fit the business challenges that we put up. But otherwise than that, there's no frames. There's a sum of money that they can spend without asking prior permission. So if they need a bent piece of metal or whatever they need, screws and something, they can just go and buy it and build the stuff so they can show to us what they have done. And then we have in a very large facility, we call it on our innovation factory. It's a big workshop, which is a lot of free space and a lot of tools and a lot of products. And there they build. So we make facades and wall sections and everything we can think of that we can use our products to. And my goal is to my role here is to make sure that this is running, and we all the time have 1 or 2 new projects in the pipeline. And for the last 6 years where I've been with Rockwool, this has been true. We've simply moved 1 or 2 new ideas up into the project portfolio every year. So quite successful. Next slide, please. Yes, just a picture of what it looks, the entrance, and then next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So what we do over there at the Innovation Factory, first of all, in the green, the first line is where if you have an idea, you can have it inside your head, but you have to make it for real. So when you make drawings, you go build it, you start showing it to a colleague, and then you get ideas and inspiration, and then you take a lot of fast iterations and you develop the idea. That's what we use for the technology push. Before the customers are aware of what comes their way, we start working with the things and saying, how can we move it? How can we solve this issue? When we then have something that is a little bit more tangible and we can see that there's a business potential here, we bring it into the portfolio of our projects, and then we invite customers in. We simply engage them, as I said before, by working with it, giving us feedback. I don't like it this way. Can I have it this way? And then we use the customer knowledge to move our development. Next slide, please. Yes, and that brings me to the last slide here, because we can get this all by ourselves. But I am really hoping to get a driver into this about energy innovation of renovation, of the existing building mass. At the moment, all new codes, they look at the new builds. I really would love to have EU legislation saying that, for example, for a project in Copenhagen these days, widely discussed, is the renovation of a big cinema complex. Just imagine that there was a demand that 25% of the products, building products going into that new product, of course, have to bring up energy savings and whatever, but it had to be reused products and it had to be saving more energy. Just imagine what that would do to all of us having to supply into it, and not just to the suppliers of raw materials and goods going into that. It would also apply to the whole food chain. So that means investors and planners and everything around it. And I think that would be a great driver to move us all going to more energy savings and hopefully also more reuse of materials. So thank you with that. I would just like to thank you all for having a chance to speak up about my work. So thank you.
And thank you, Dorthe, for that wonderful insight into some of the upstream thinking and innovative actions that take place inside companies. Fascinating story.
Thank you.
So we come now to our last and third speaker, and before I introduce him, I want to remind you of the possibility to ask questions. We would like to animate and moderate a discussion around the contribution companies can make to the renovation wave after this last presentation. So please don't be shy. But it's my great pleasure now to introduce Tom de Fruitier from Signify. Tom is going to talk about how to make energy efficient buildings smart. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Adrian.
We hear you perfectly.
Okay, good. I'm going to talk a little bit about office buildings in specific, because in office buildings there has been since a couple of years a big trend towards smart buildings. And the building that you see in the picture here dates from 2015. It's a building called The Edge, which is occupied by Deloitte in Amsterdam. It was for Signify the first smart building project, but it is also still a project which is, or a building which is one of the most sustainable buildings in the world, but also giving the employees an engaging office experience, and therefore an inspiration to many who are building new office buildings. But of course, if we want to make our cities and our a lot smarter than they are today, we will need to do more than have these kind of iconic new builds. We will also need to think about how we can make our existing buildings smart, so we can also make those more sustainable and more engaging for employees. Next slide, please. At Signify, we also believe that this is really the right time to accelerate renovation, and for our business lighting, that means to accelerate really the LEDification of our real estate portfolio, and then use that actually to make those buildings smart in one go. And why do we think that? Is because we analyze, of course, what the market is like and what our market potential is. And we know that in a region where I'm actually am from the Benelux, but that's mostly true for the rest of Europe as well, is that still up to 70% of buildings still have conventional lighting. And for an office building, that is usually TL lighting. And conventional TL lighting, there's different generations of it, but if you have a generation which is maybe 15 years old, we know that if we replace that with a energy efficient LED system, also not just a LED lamp, but really a system that includes a motion sensor and really steering when the light is on, that can save up to 80% of energy. And lighting in an office building is a substantial part of the energy consumption. So there's a huge potential of reducing our carbon footprints simply by replacing our lamps. And if we do that, well, why not go one step further and use that opportunity to make those buildings smart as well. Next slide, please. Why now is also about the current crisis we're in. It's only it's a couple of weeks that we are in this crisis and all working from home, and this has also helped us at Signify to really think of a smart building differently, and to know what can this smart building with all this data help us to to make it a more safe place to work as well. We now have really worked on use cases to think about how people can be guided away from areas when a certain people quota is met. If you are in a smart building, you can actually know how many people are in a certain room, so you can also guide people away if it's too busy. It also helps you to reserve a workplace up front even before you leave home. And data about occupancy can also help others, not just the people in the building, but also the cleaning companies, for example, to clean more intensively in the areas where more people have been during the day. So it's not just about looking where people might have been, because maybe it's not so tidy anymore, but also really knowing with actual data to understand how the building has been used during the day. So this is the kind of data that we have been looking at with fresh eyes in the last couple of weeks as well. Next slide, please. So why Signify, which is basically a lighting company, how can we help in making those buildings smart? And it's not just about the light itself, which obviously needs to be smart in a smart building, but it's also about the unique position of lighting in a building. There is a light point on a ceiling at least every 5 meters. A light point means there is power on that ceiling, and a lighting system always includes some form of communication protocol. So if we add sensors to the lighting system and connect that system to the internet, by just adding these two simple components, you actually turn an existing system which you already need in a building into a digital backbone of that smart building. Next slide. So how does that work? Well, in a renovation project, we would replace the old energy inefficient conventional TL lighting with LED luminaires, and there's just an example on the left of the slide here. And because these luminaires are linked with each other with a wireless communication protocol, which in this case is Zigbee, they can be installed with limited disruption. So it's almost as easy as changing a lamp, and then we connect that lighting system to the cloud. And it goes, of course, without saying that this needs to be in a way which is respecting security and privacy concerns. An energy-saving lighting system always comes with a motion sensor, so the light only shines when it's needed. But now we will add into that space where we will put a sensor, we will replace that motion sensor with a more multifunctional sensor, which will measure all the things that you really need in a sustainable and healthy building. I'm thinking about what Till said earlier on what is important, and these are things like temperature, humidity, sound pressure. All those elements can be captured via the lighting system. It will not help the lighting system at all, but the data generated can be distributed via the cloud somewhere else. And somewhere else means, in the first place, of course, the building itself, because the temperature and the occupancy will be very interesting for your HVAC installation. But all this data can also flow to dashboards of the facility manager, so he really understands what's going on in a building, not just right now, but also through a historical database, and use that information to optimize the building, not based on, well, his guess or information that he got from people, but really to have data to underpin any strategic decision. That same data can also flow to a personal app or a kiosk, which is used by the employees, and this is turning the smart building not only into a sustainable and efficient building, but also into a more digital and engaging workplace. So in spite of the fact that we have been working from home since the last couple of weeks, and that we all managed to do that, we still miss that office, because we still need a place to go to, not just to go to work from 9 to 5 and do our emails, but we do need a place to engage with others and to build on each other's ideas and to really be part of a company culture. And therefore we believe that these things will go hand in hand, that there will be a growing need for smart buildings from an HR point of view, but also from a sustainability point of view, and that the time is really now to accelerate that via renovation. Thank you.
Tom, thank you very much for that. A great insight into digitalization and the positive impacts it can have. And I'm going to come back to you with a couple of questions on what you've presented in terms of the current crisis. So I see, although we have a big audience, they're shy and there are no questions in the chat box just yet. So I remind you, this is the moment to enter a question. But while you're thinking of those questions, I'm going to come back to the speakers with questions of my own. And I would like to start, if I could, with Tilla, because Tilla, you presented very well the Renov Active concept that's being rolled out, we know, here in Belgium. And as one of the big challenges of the renovation wave to come is scaling up very good approaches, I wonder how is Velux finding that the Renov Active concept is being received outside of the current commune in Anderlecht here in Brussels? Is it being rolled out to other countries?
As I'm not the expert from Belgium, I'm not able to give so much deep details about the exact plans about the rollout in Belgium. But we are in Germany in dialogue with different entities how to roll out similar, not the same, but similar concepts. That is the case. But also, as we all know, it is a difficult issue and not so easy to reach. But the base to have not high-end lighthouses and concept houses, but concepts which are affordable. Affordable by a good planning process, and that is, I think, the main issue. Not by the most expensive products, as expensive as possible. That's not the case. The planning process is the most important, and we are also in discussion in Germany with different entities to invest here. That good planning tools are able to reach such qualities as Renovactive without a cost boost. That's important. So we have to strengthen the planners and their tools, and so we are in a close dialogue with them.
And I mean, this is happening not just in Belgium and Germany, but is Velux looking to have those conversations with many European countries?
Yes, as I know. Yeah.
Go ahead, Till. Yeah, go ahead, Till.
Yeah, to make it short, yes, as I know from several colleagues from other European countries, that approach from the beginning was planned in that way, that the ideas and the basic concept of Renovactive are to spread in Europe. But we also have to be in mind there is not one European concept. We don't have one building typology in Europe. We have different climate zones, we have different societies and needs. So it is a bit more tricky to translate it into that different zones. But the basic aspects we try to implement in the debates, especially with planner associations and around.
Okay, Till, thank you very much for that insight. And Dorta, your presentation, which I found fascinating, you highlighted, I think quite rightly, that a lot of what moves the dial in the building sector are regulations, and that in order to meet new regulations, new products have got to be brought online. But there's another aspect that's interesting to me, and I wonder if Rock will address it, and that is that new products sometimes need new skills for them to be properly applied in projects. Does Rockwool address that issue as we can think about there will probably be a skills need moving forward with the renovation wave?
But I thank you, Adrian, for that very relevant question, because you're absolutely right. And that's what some of the things that also is holding back our industry is that you have the skill sets divided into different. You have the carpenters, you have the guys making the fundament, you have the painters and everything around it. And every group have their own skill set, and they're not really likely to change. So they too have to go through these different phases of change. And what we do also by inviting people and the skill sets in for doing the testing in our innovation factory is to start training and figuring out which skills are we needing. And then sometimes we'd have to adapt that into a new product being sold out there. We have recently launched a project or a product called Rock Zero, which is a lighter and more slimmer wall system, which allows us to have thinner walls and still fulfill the 2020 European regulations. And that needs a new skill set because it's a different way of building. And we have taken it upon us to make sure that we provide that out to the ones making the projects and the ones installing it as well. So we've taken it upon us to make the installation guides and the training sessions as well. And it's quite interesting because we learn a lot as we go along with that. We also develop our product solution while we have people in and helping us with what is needed. On the other hand, we also understand that the fastest way to get new renovations out there is if we can lean as much as possible up to the skill sets that are already out there. It's a huge task and probably close to impossible to change behavior on that many people on a short scale. You need a bigger crisis like we've just seen. I think all of us have upgraded our digital capabilities in the last couple of weeks. But I'm not prone to put that kind of scale out there. So what we try to do is invite them in and help us to find the good golden middle way where we install new skills and at the same time, most of the time, lean upon what's out there. Because I think the overall goal is to have as much energy renovation out there as possible.
Thank you, Dorta. I fully agree. And great to hear that Rockwool is taking responsibility on that front as you develop products. And just to turn to our last speaker, Tom, the question that struck me, and I'm delighted to see questions are coming in the chat box, so we'll return to those in a moment. But Tom, you mentioned the impact of the COVID crisis and the fact that we are all now working from home, and Dr. has just pointed out that we've all dramatically increased our digital skills. I for one feel that way. But my question really was, with smart technologies like the ones that you put forward and really good data around building occupation, do you see that the modern office is going to be a much more flexible office thanks to these capacities? And if that's the case, how easy is it to retrofit these technologies into existing buildings? Because I know the Edge was a new build. Could you address those questions, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely, Adrian. I think what any crisis does is doesn't, well, it may start new trends, but it will certainly accelerate existing trends. So I think when we talk about smart buildings, it will accelerate, because a smart office starts with a different office culture, which is not a culture about you go there to work and then you go back home. So the companies who already have a smart building like the Edge already have an HR policy of where people have more freedom to go and choose where they work, whether it's in office A or B or at home. So this will, I think this will accelerate. What is really new is how we look at that occupancy data. What before the industry was really interested in occupancy data, it was really about reducing office space, because office space is usually very expensive space, especially if we talk about, let's say, the more premium office space in our big cities like Amsterdam, but London, Paris. These are really expensive square meters. Looking at it with different eyes, we more think about the flexibility of understanding what is happening in the office, and to really, be able to have more or less people depending on whether that is appropriate, yes or no. Of course, we all hope that this COVID-19 crisis will go away soon, and that we will go back to a normal way of going to work like we were used to. But I think we also understand that there may be just more times like this, if not as urgent or as big as today. Even during a normal flu season, you may want to have an office space which is, keeping a little bit more distance and a little bit different rules than you would have, a few weeks later. And I think in my presentation, I did address that indeed a smart building like the Edge is really thought of from the ground up of how to make this building completely smart. But we believe that with at least via using an upgrade of the lighting system, you can make a big step into smartness, and you can renovate ongoing. So a big part of making from an energy point of view, an existing building also smarter is HVAC. But those in a renovation, they don't need to necessarily all come at the same time, because we see that everything which is really technology related in a building is moving a lot of that smartness to the cloud. So it is really in the cloud where APIs and data are talking to each other. And this is already the case when you talk about a new build, but it can also go step by step by, if you start with the lighting, you will have certain use cases and certain things that will already work. But if you then later change your HVAC, then you can just use the data that you already have and make those systems more sustainable and more efficient as well.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Tom. There's actually a specific question that was addressed to me for you, Tom. It's simple. Does a Signify light come with a CO2 sensor integrated?
It does not come with a CO2 sensor integrated, because CO2 is heavier than air, so you shouldn't measure CO2 on the ceiling. But we do have a separate sensor which can be wall mounted and then will communicate to the ceiling, and then via the ceiling and the grids go to the same cloud environment as well. So it's integrated into the system, but it will not be physically integrated in the luminaire, because that would not be the right place to measure that data.
Okay,
but the
thank
other
you.
data like humidity, temperature. And what I find interesting is not just about what you measure, but also how the data is interpreted. Like the temperature is actually helping us to make a temperature picture, so to say, and that temperature picture helps us even to estimate how many people there are in the room, because your body temperature will be different than the room temperature, and that is a really, let's say, a really secure and privacy-proof way of measuring how many people there are.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So just looking in the chat box, I see that Sabine Pokwe, whom I know works for Velux, has here in Belgium, has clarified that Renovactive has been reproduced in Slovakia and in Flanders, a region of Belgium, and that there's discussions ongoing for further projects in Belgium as well. So thank you for that additional information, Sabine. There's another question from Andreas Jaeger, which I think, although one might at first think it goes only to signify, I think the other companies would also be in a position to answer this question. So maybe I will ask Tille first to react. In the context of energy efficient retrofits, integrating technological solutions from different manufacturers into a building energy management system can be challenging and costly, while using technology packages offered by a single company can create dependencies. Are industry partners looking into harmonized or common interfaces to tackle this issue? Dorte, would you like to comment on this idea about manufacturers needing to have common standards?
Yes, thank you. I would love to comment on that. And of course, it depends on I can see Tille is having problems with the connection there. I'm sure he can fix it while I make a lengthy reply then. No, it's always relevant to have harmonized and common interfaces, especially when you talk about electronic devices, because it makes life so much easier for everyone, both for the customers, but also for people developing it. We have spent a lot of time thinking, how can we connect our stone wool products to the rest of the building? And we sort of find that it's much more useful inside the factory and in the manufacturing process of the products rather than out on the house, because what we do is hidden away. It has a silent way of working inside the walls. But of course, it could be carrying some of these measurements, and the sensors could be sitting in the products. But that's another discussion. But there we are looking more to the other partners, I must admit here. But you can say what we're trying to do is looking into harmonized legislation, just as I touched a point in my departure message, that the more harmonized legislation comes and the more uniform it is across all the countries that we're selling into, it's easier, and there will be much more solutions out there for the customers and much less dependency on a single company. So I really appreciate harmonization and common interfaces.
Okay. Tom, yes. Would you like to say a few words on this?
Yeah, absolutely, because we have a technological project. This product, this is really something that we encounter every day. I think first of all, we do agree, and I think everybody who's working on smart buildings is that a smart building is an ecosystem. It is not something you do alone. So you need to work together, and it does add a layer of complexity, especially because somebody needs to bring the technology together, who needs to have a certain IT competency as well. So that's also why you see that it's only working if that competency is already on the client side, or the client side is getting the consultancy to do that. When it comes to really from a technology point of view, is we bring everything, as we said, to the cloud, as do other companies, and those APIs, they manage to talk to each other. Although we all agree that it could be easier if it would be more standardized. And I think, the discussions I've had on the topic is that everybody in the industry agrees that what is really missing is an operating system for buildings. If you compare it to a computer, is like Windows for buildings in a way. So it is getting better, as in the compatibility of technology, because we do have a lot more outside relationships on R&D level, also with other manufacturers. So it is about alliances, it is about working together, but for sure it would be a lot easier if there would at some day also be kind of an operating system for buildings, which is bringing all that technology together in a much easier way than it is today.
Okay, I can imagine talking further about that, but as time is running, And I see a very interesting question from Radoš Horček from the DG Energy. I would put that back to you. And Tilla, if you can, if your connection problems have ended, then you can also contribute. But the question reads, do the companies prepare for 2050 decarbonization of buildings? What is your view of a decarbonized building? What elements do you scale up now to make them cost efficient for the new builds and renovations that happen today? So a wide-ranging question, but I've no doubt our companies are thinking about it. Dorte, would you like to be the first to answer?
Sorry, I just needed to unmute as well. So yes, thank you. Let me give it a try here. Because there's many views on what is a decarbonized building. And one of the things we've been looking on for quite some years actually is going back to something that's very much at heart of what we do, is then the embedded carbon in the products that we put out there. And one of the things we're looking up for is again linking back to my wish for the new regulations coming, that we can be prompted to take, for example, if you renovate a building, take out the old insulation material, preferably stone wool for my case, and then rework it with not adding more carbonization. So keeping the embedded carbon at the level that it was upon installation, but somehow remaking it into a new product that could be used out there. I thought that could be a great idea, but it's difficult, and there's a lot of legislation that needs to fall into place on the side of it. So it's a long haul, but we've started doing a lot of testing at the moment.
Great.
So that's one perspective from our side.
Great, very helpful, Dorte. And Till, I see you look like you're unmuted. Would you like to react to this question?
I hope it works now. Yeah.
It does, yes.
Where we see the potential for next steps in decarbonization and also responsible to look for social and affordable solutions. We see it is to see the building envelope, and that is our area together with insulation and others, to see it more in future more dynamic and not so static anymore. We don't have only winter, we have also summer. It is important with the view on our window, when it is open, when it's closed, how to use the solar shading, and also not only focusing on the energy losses of the envelope, also about the solar gains of the envelope, and to find here right balances. Windows are installed in any house, so that does not make the cost difference, but to consider more that dynamic approach and also the balance of energy loss and solar gains. Here we see a huge potential without significant cost increase to get better and solutions with lower carbon needs.
Okay, and finally, Tom. It will be the last word from the speakers.
Sorry, did you ask me, Adrian?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Your view on decarbonization and preparations for decarbonization moving forward.
Well, our focus, of course, in how to reduce the energy consumption of lighting, as lighting is something which 90% of or more of the energy is during the lifetime and not so much on the product itself. What we do believe in is and the connected lighting really helps on that, is to have more of a view of longer term on our lighting system, which also allows a lot of upgradability. If you think of the sensors that I just mentioned, who can imagine what type of sensors we would need in 5 years and how they could really help to make the building more sustainable. So it's also about being able to do that through sensors, hardware, but also really thinking of the components of the lighting. And a way to do that in a business model is also by actually offering lighting as a service model, and we call that light as a service. And that really helps, the customer, because they just pay a flat fee, and over the years we can really discuss with them of how to upgrade their lighting. It's kind of what Tesla does with their cars as well. And in that contract, we can also guarantee that at the end of the lifetime, that we guarantee that we take those products back, so we can also keep those resources in a shorter loop, and keep that, in that way also help to make a building more circular.
Great. Thank you, Tom, and thank you to the three speakers for a very stimulating exchange following your presentations. I now pass back to our Vice President, Céline Carré, for a few concluding words. Céline.
Thank you to the three speakers. I think it was very inspiring. As you know, EuroACE has big hopes for the Renovation Wave and the accompanying financing package. And I think this webinar has shown that we see it as a collective game between policy, finance, and what industry can deliver. We have learned a lot about aspects that can encourage consumers to take on renovation, such as virtual visualization and planning tool, which I believe is very important in this renovation wave. For example, building renovation passports could play this role. We have learned about people and processes, and also the interaction between industry putting on the market new products and how people can perceive this in relation to upcoming regulation. And I think this point is also very important. And we've learned also about how smart building can not only deliver better efficiency, but tick the boxes on other aspects of our life, especially in this post-COVID world. So I would just underline that at this stage, we are going to remain engaged in this process with the Renovation Wave. We see that better vision, visibility, and ambition with policy opens up the space for innovation on our side, and not only in research and development, developing new technologies and training professionals, but also in helping to tackle the more subtle barriers, psychological barriers of renovation, and engaging in collaboration with partners, I would say, beyond the business as usual. So I would just close this by underlining how important this interaction between policy visibility in the Renovation Wave is, and what we can do and invest on as businesses. We will continue the series of webinars with EuroACE, a deep dive on specific topic. I can already announce a webinar on schools, and the specific date will be communicated shortly. So I thank everyone, participants and speaker, and wish you a very nice day.
Thank you.